Hey guys. Matt's kind of covered off a lot of things that I was going to talk about with Next.js. Hopefully you've all got a pretty good fundamental understanding now of what Next.js is. And in this presentation, I'm going to go through how to leverage Next.js and get the most out of your website performance-wise by hybridizing your apps with client-side components when you need a lot of interactivity and you have to respond to user inputs, submit forms, things like that, as well as how to make things performant by server rendering a lot of aspects of your site that remain static. So for a little bit about me, my name is Caleb Williams. I'm a software engineer at SSW. I've been working for here about a year, and I mainly specialize in front-end development, so projects with Angular or Next.js, but I also specialize as a .NET developer. Internally, I mainly work on the SSW website as well as Next.js. Also, I'm the only human being who can lift my own elbow. If anyone can disprove me on that after the presentation, I'll be impressed. So, like I said, I'm going to cover off how you can get the most out of your sites by hybridizing your apps with server and client components. And in order to do that, I wanted to first build up the pain and explain how we got to the point of having server components and rendering things on the server. And I'm going to do that by giving you a brief history of how we got up to here, and hopefully that'll help you understand the pain. So yeah, in the 90s, websites, there was a high bar of entry. HTML was invented in 1991 by Tim Berners-Lee, and there wasn't really a great deal of interaction. Websites were pretty ugly. It was mainly just a very convenient way to direct people to your brick and mortars business. There was no interactivity there. And we needed a lightweight scripting language to allow for a little bit more dynamic functionality. So in 1997, JavaScript was invented by Brendan Eich. He wrote it in the span of 10 days. Sorry, are you seeing the wrong slide? Okay, sorry. So in 1997, JavaScript was invented by Brendan Eich. As you can probably tell from this slide, I'm not the biggest fan of JavaScript, but yeah, anyway, it was written in 10 days. It was a lightweight scripting language, and it became the ECMAScript 262 standard. So it was a standard for browser developers to adhere to when their browsers load scripts from an HTML fetch. In 2001, jQuery was released. That simplified a lot of the things you could do with JavaScript just by adding a convenient wrapper for your website to interact with DOM elements, maybe hide things based on user inputs and things like that. But a big thing that it did is it introduced AJAX, which is a much simplified method of fetching data from your server without having to reload the page, as opposed to the XHTML request that JavaScript supported natively. This was later made a bit redundant because the Fetch API started to become widely supported by browsers in 2015. So in 2008, static site generation started to become a thing. So this has really been around for quite a long time, and it's making more of a resurgence as we're beginning to move away from single page applications. But yeah, back in 2008, Jekyll, written in Ruby on Rails, was the first static site generator to use Markdown. So that kind of brings us to where we are now with us using Markdown to generate pages based on templates. In 2013, React was released by Meta. It was open source by Meta. It had some basic server-side rendering capabilities based on the patch notes, but it was more something that enthusiasts would do. If you were spinning up a new React application using the standard create React app template, which has now been deprecated, you were just looking at generating a single page application. But if you did want to use server-side rendering, JavaScript had a method that you could run called React DOM server.render_to_string, and you could probably run that on a Node.js server, but it wasn't shipped with your app. Okay, so what is a SPA? Well, it's a bit of a misnomer. A SPA, you can simulate a lot of routing functionality using SPAs. Back when we were writing vanilla React applications and not using frameworks like Gatsby and Next.js, you would install React Router, and that would simulate routing capabilities on your website by fetching new data and updating the DOM based on that data. Yeah, that pretty much covers off everything about SPAs, I guess. 2015, Gatsby was released, and that gave us it's a React framework that allows you to leverage static site generation as well as server-side rendering. So that gave us a lot of the component-based architecture of React and event handling, while giving us the performance of vanilla HTML pages. Although if you're running JavaScript client side, it might still be a little bit slower, but it's a performance improvement. I also want to give a shout out to server-side rendering. It saw its infancy in 1995 with PHP, but that wasn't really the server-side rendering that we know today. It that involved generating HTML based on requests rather than shipping different JavaScript components, pre-rendered JavaScript components like you would with Next.js. Actually, the main difference between server-side rendering in the 90s is that level of hydration. If a page was server rendered in PHP, you typically just got a static page once that response was formed, whereas nowadays you can load a static page and then hydrate that data using new data from your APIs. And Next.js makes that easy. Okay, so now that I've hopefully enlightened you a bit on how we got to the point of using server-side rendering and client-side rendering and why we don't just ship vanilla HTML pages anymore. Although I should add, if you're looking at creating a very simple HTML page, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. But, for something more dynamic, like if you're handling point of sales transactions, I think it makes more sense to opt with a framework. Anyway, now that I've built up the pane, I was looking to show you guys what client component and server components are and how to use them. First, I'll dive back into the pane with SPAs. So they are less performance SEO-wise, which Matt kind of covered up on, which Matt covered. If you look at Lighthouse reports and things like that, they look at metrics like cumulative layout shift and total blocking time. So cumulative layout shift is when your page loads, and then on the client there's a big shift as the data updates. So that could be because there's some JavaScript that evaluates and shifts the layout, or it could be an image that loads and the aspect ratio changes and the whole page reloads. And that can be a pain with SPAs, because when you create a SPA, you're fetching data from an API after the fact. Your page doesn't ship with the precompiled HTML like you would if you were leveraging server components. So yeah, Google does penalize your SEO based on these things, so they're important. So the way Next.js handles server components is it ships them as precompiled HTML using a React server component format, so an RSC. And the benefit of this is you're just evaluating all of the JavaScript on the server, And then when the client requests it, you don't need to ship the code that you use to render out that HTML. It's just ready to plug into your app. So it results in a smaller payload when the client requests the page, as well as a better user experience once the page is actually loaded, because it doesn't have to build anything out. So there's a few trade-offs with using Next server components. I kind of just rattled them off before, but like I said, it's you're shipping less code, you're shipping more. You're shipping less code to the client. It's faster, but there are some negative trade-offs to using them over client components, and those are that you can't use client-side scripts in them. So if you want to do something like have a button that toggles part of the screen when it's clicked, you can't do things like that because it's not shipping any of the JavaScript and dynamic functionality that you usually get when you use client-side scripts in a vanilla React app. So if you want to use those client-side scripts, you need to opt in. There's a use client directive in Next.js, and if you put that at the top of any of your TSX files or JSX files, if you're just using vanilla JavaScript, which I wouldn't really recommend, although I don't believe Next.js supports vanilla JavaScript. I think TypeScript is baked in. But yeah, I digress a bit. If you want that client-side functionality within your component, you need to put the use client directive at the top of it, and then you can use the standard hooks that you would use in React. So, like I said, it allows for those complex user interactions, and it might decrease blocking time. For those of you that don't know, JavaScript is still a single-threaded language, so any code that runs on the client can prevent the user from doing certain interactions, especially if you're not handling asynchronous functions properly. Like if you're not if you're not using promises to free up the main thread to work on other tasks while you're waiting for an asynchronous request and doing things like that. Next, I wanted to go through some do's and don'ts for using client and server components, because when you start using client and server components within the app router, it can be a little bit to get your head around. I know personally, when I started using app routing, I thought it was a pain. I thought it was confusing. I just wanted to go back to this typical method of doing things in Next.js. So hopefully this section will free up a little bit of confusion. So the first thing is you can't use barrel exports. So if you've got a server component, you can only have a default export. You can't export data from that component. You have to do that either from a separate file or from a client component. But you can import data from a separate file. I covered this off before, but you can't have client-side hooks within server components. So no use effects or anything like that, although you probably won't need it in a server component. Another thing that I should add is you can have props for your server components. So you can pass data in on the server side, but it has to be serializable. You can't pass in dynamic values. Oh, and another thing is you can use context providers. Can you guys see that slide? So yeah, you can use context providers within server components, but you have to declare the use client directive where you're building that context provider and import it into the server component itself. You can also use it within client components. Oh, and of course, any components that use that context also need to be client rendered. Okay, so now that I've covered everything off and given you a brief rundown of what Next.js server components are, I'm going to do a live demo which will show you the benefits of using a lot of server components and like hybrid architectures where you've got a server component with a lot of client components in it. I'm going to show you the benefits of doing that. Okay. You guys see that? Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention. For anyone following along at home, the endpoints I'm going to be using in this talk are, I'm going to be using a public endpoint in this talk, and I've also released the source code for the project that I'm working on. So you can use that endpoint and follow along. Right. So first of all, I'm going to do things the vanilla way that you would do things in a React app. So hey, is there any way to share a different screen over there? Okay. Okay, so what I've got here is I've got a Next.js app, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to client render everything like you would with a React app. Then I'm just going to do everything strictly server rendered, and then I'm going to use that hybrid approach, and hopefully you'll understand the trade-offs of both once I'm done. But first of all, I'm just going to briefly install Bootstrap, just because I want my web page to look a little bit nicer. Hands up who's used Bootstrap before? Everyone. That was the idea. Okay, so I found what you can do in Next.js apps is you can just fetch that data from a CDN and put that in the head tag of your layout file, and that'll just include those JavaScript and CSS files that you need on every single page. And there's a little bit of an error going on there because some of these tags aren't self-terminating. Sorry, can everyone see all right? I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, now to speed things up, I'm going to just copy a table from Bootstrap so that I don't have to do any of the formatting myself and render it out. Does anyone know why I keep having to change things like class and call span? No? Okay. What you're seeing here isn't actually HTML, it's JSX. And one of the limitations of JSX is that props need to be camel case. So it doesn't actually have attributes like call span or things like that. It's got camel case versions of it. Next, I'm just going to style it a little bit, put a heading in there. Custom CRM. Cool. Now, if I run it, I should see my table. Oh. Okay, so that should be ready. Now, if I go to the home page, I should just see the table, but I'm not fetching anything from my endpoint right now, so this is all just HTML. So, a typical way that we do things in React is we've got a state value. So I'm going to do that. And what happens when I update this state value is the UI will update to reflect the changes. I'll just give it an initial empty value. And I'm going to use that to store the list of customers in my CRM. But first, I find it's easier to start writing code when I've got my type declaration sorted out rather than just doing things off the cuff. So I'm going to create a type for the customer that is returned from my endpoint. So we've got an ID, email, like that. So now I can just update use state, which I haven't imported. Oh, also, if I load this right now, I'm going to get this error. Does anyone know what's going on here? Does anyone know how to fix this? So like I said before, by default, Next.js will try to server render everything, and I've just used a client-side hook here. So it's throwing an error because of that. So to opt into client-side rendering, like I said before, I'll just put the use client directive at the top, and everything should be fine. Okay, so now that I've got my type declaration sorted out, I will do the data fetch for it. I'm going to just template my use state method so that I know, so that TypeScript knows that I'm expecting a payload matching this customer object here, and I'm expecting a list of them. I'll give it a default value of null so that I know when the data hasn't been fetched, and I will I'll add a loading state into my app until the customer data has been fetched. Yeah. Close. PD. Span equals 4. Getting a typo here. So that's a T body. Wait, didn't these have scope? Oh, it had a TH. The table data element doesn't have scope. And 4. Now I'm just going to add a placeholder there so that I've got something to let me know that the data fetch is happening. And then using React, using an expression, I'll just display this whenever I don't have any customers. So that's customers is null. And there we go. Cool. Okay, so now I'm actually going to do some data fetching. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to call useEffect, and what useEffect does in React is it'll either fire once on initial render, or it'll fire whenever a property within this component changes. If you want it to fire once, all you need to do is pass in this empty array. This is where you'd usually put your dependencies if you wanted to update based on whether state values change. But if you just want it to fire once, you can leave it empty. Next, I'm going to make a call to my API using Axios, and that's just a JavaScript library for doing simple HTTP requests. Cool. So that's installed. Import Axios from Axios. I'm just going to create a wrapper method that's going to handle the data fetching from that endpoint. It looks like Copilot kind of knows what I'm doing, but it couldn't possibly know about the endpoint I'm going to use, so I'm just going to copy that in. There you go. Fetch from that. That. Oh, it's a bit of a long URL. I got confused there. True. Okay, so now I've got my async method set up, and I'm just going to call it from within useEffect so that as soon as the page loads, it's going to get that list of customers. Oh, and I should template this method as well so that it knows that I'm getting a list of customers. It's a lot easier to debug. Cool. And when I've got my customers, I'm going to customers equal null, and customers dot map customer. I think Copilot should be smart enough to figure out what I'm doing. Oh. There we go. Oh, I just stopped the app. So npm run dev. Okay, so when this loads, assuming I've done everything correctly, I should see a loading screen, and then yeah, it just updates with all of my live data. So that's the main pain there. You could add some skeleton loading or something into your table so that it just displays a bunch of blank records before it fetches the data, and that would reduce the cumulative layout shift issue a little bit. But it's a lot easier to just server render this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to do it purely static. This is actually a lot easier. Like I said, everything's server rendered by default. So all I need to do is just assign customers on the server component without doing any of this client-side fetching. And I'll just get rid of the load screen data there because there's never a scenario where customers is not unless my endpoint didn't return something. Yeah, so now that I'm strictly server rendering everything, if I go to static, there's no loading screen at all. And if I click on that on that Next.js icon, just like Matt said, Next.js tells me that this is all being statically rendered. So if you just wanted to fetch a bunch of customer records, this would be the way to do it in Next.js. But to kind of drive home the pain with using purely server-rendered components, I'm going to try to add a search box and show you where things start to fall over. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste all the code from my static route, create a new route doing the exact same thing, and I'll chuck in an input box so that I can, I believe there's an email search that will do exactly what I want to do. I can't put that in a table. Input, right. Okay, no corresponding closing tag. Last name is Valentine. Okay, so now I've got a search box that I can use to search customer records. So the way I would do that is I'd use a use memo hook, and that will update the customer filter whenever. Okay, well, first I need to bind the search term to my search box. So I'll create a use state variable here. And then when that input value changes, it's just going to update it with the current search term. Equals customers.filter use customer. Customer email to lowercase, search term to lowercase. And then instead of mapping out the customers, I'll use my filtered customers. So this is the limitation with server components. I can display static pages very easily, but the minute I start adding in dynamic functionality, things start to fall apart a bit. And this is where hybrid apps come in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to skip this. Interesting. Why is that? I maybe use client from the wrong thing. Wait, no, that's the static route. This is the problem with live coding. Wait, is that? Oh, okay, that's the error from my hybrid page. So yeah, I need use state because I want to update the search term, but I want the performance benefits of fetching from that database when my page, before my page hits the client, so that things are a little bit more snappy. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create client components for the search box as well as the table data, so that those both update dynamically while server rendering everything else. So creates table data tsx filtered search.tsx. Cool. I'll just copy everything over from this hybrid. Search is that's search. Also, things are going to be a little bit tricky here. This might be the stage where I lose people a bit because I can't have the search data sitting in my page route because that's being that's being server rendered. But so I'm gonna need to create a context provider and then add the search information there and centralize all of the all of the logic around the search box. So okay, so I've got that. There's nothing I can really pass into search term. Oh wait. But I don't want to bind that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the event handler for when the input changes into that context provider so that I can access the search value from my other components. So I'll create a provider ESX was search context equals create context, and I'll give that search type search type. So I'll give that the search term and the method for updating my search. Search term is initially going to be blank. That search term is just a callback function that doesn't return anything. And using that context, I can create a context provider to pass that data down into the client components. Okay, so that should work. I've just got the term itself sitting up here. And within the search box, oh, sorry, I forgot to do one more thing within my context provider. I want to export a hook that I can use within the client components to get the value of the search. Search, use context, search context. Oh, also, as I mentioned on the slides, I've got to put the use client directive wherever I'm going to initialize a context provider. I can use it within server components, but in the file where I declare it, I need to mark it as a client component. Oh, I also need to export those. So import use search. I'll set search term use search. So I'm just getting the event handler from that context provider and updating. I'm centralizing the value by just updating it within the component rather than having the component itself store the value. Okay. Okay, and now for table data, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy everything that I had from my hybrid page, or just move it out into a separate component. Once table data. Copilot's messed up there. I don't actually want to pass in set search term as a prop because I can't access set search term from the other page. Once search term, we'll get search term from my provider. We'll use search. I'm also going to update the type here for table data so that it's easier to debug. And I'm going to move that I'm going to move that customer type into a separate folder because, like I said, you can't export things from server components, so I need a different file location to do that. Yes. So just move that here. Export type customer. And then I can use that type in my other client component. Now for filtered customers, I'm going to use Memo to update the customer list to whenever the search value changes. And I'll just do that by sticking search term in the dependency array. Yeah, I think I've got a missing comma. Oh, okay. It's just a TypeScript error. So it's because is it a TypeScript error? Sorry? Oh, I think so. No, that's not it. So which prop name? Like, I don't know why that's implicitly any type because does it know what that is? Knows what customer is, knows that it's an array. Oh, I haven't wrapped it in the use memo hook. We'll use memo. So then I have callback method that just tells it what to do when the dependencies change, and that's just going to return value. And I've got a missing closing parenthesis somewhere around here. I believe. Oh, I think it's because I'm not returning a React component, I'm returning an expression. Okay, so live coding doesn't always go well. Sorry. Ports, default table metadata, table data. Okay, so we've got our table data set up. We just want to make sure that we pass in the customers from our server component, which we can do. Table data here. And the benefit of doing this is we get the customers that we fetched on our server, but we also have the dynamic functionality of using a client component, so we can filter. Also updates the input with my client search component. Oh, is that being exported? It's not. Okay. Export default search. Is that expecting a print? Oh, okay, it's not. And then I just want to wrap this entire thing in my search provider so that I can see the okay, it's got to be outside the div. Oh, and there's a missing import here. And I believe that should work. Okay, so I'm missing a use client directive somewhere around here. Oh no, I want that to be purely server rendered. That doesn't need to be. Oh, I've still got my import here. So it's not just whether or not you use state, it's whether or not you import it. Yes. Okay. So yeah, that's working. So yeah, a little bit of setup, but now when I reload the page, everything's there on the initial render, just like it was on my static route. But I've also got that dynamic functionality where I can change the search term. So that was pretty much everything I had to cover off. Hopefully you guys can see that by combining client and server components, you can have some cool features on your web page while also getting all the benefits that you would get with server components. Thanks.
That's good, Mike.